You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. This week, my guest is Dr. Cassie Holmes. Cassie is an award-winning teacher and researcher on time and happiness. She's a professor at UCLA's Anderson School of Management and the author of the book, Happier Hour: How to Beat Distraction, Expand Your Time, and Focus on What Matters Most. Cassie's book has been a mega hit. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller and Amazon Best Book of 2022. Her work is powerful and, dare I say, timely. Research shows that 46% of Americans feel time poor, like they don't have enough time. And so many others around the world feel the same way as well. I know I feel it. I constantly add more to my plate and in turn feel like I don't have enough time. Most importantly, I want to be the best husband and father I can be. And I always want to be there for family and friends. And I also have big professional responsibilities and ambitious goals that I want to achieve. And as a parent of young kids, I also find myself frequently thinking about how my kids spend their time and the role that we as parents play in helping them build a life filled with success, happiness, and fulfillment. It turns out this conversation with Cassie was just what I needed. Cassie says that the research tells us we shouldn't expect less of ourselves, but it's how we spend our time that matters. And the best part is, her groundbreaking research shows that even small changes in how we spend our time can have a massive impact on our happiness and well-being. In our conversation, Cassie took me behind the scenes of her powerful research and shared easy-to-implement tips we all can utilize to feel less overwhelmed, more present, and greater happiness. We explored so many powerful ideas, including when we should have our phone out to capture the moment versus when we should just enjoy it, how to carve free time into our schedules, the importance of creative time, how to turn routines into memorable rituals, the power of random acts of kindness, and so much more. This is a conversation that I really needed to have, and one that I will think about for many, many years to come. I am so grateful Cassie and I crossed paths, and I hope you take away as much from this conversation as I did. So, let's pull the tarp and get straight to Dr. Cassie Holmes. Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, Cassie.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Andrew. I'm happy to be here.
Cassie, I am happy to have you here, and we're going to talk about happiness and time, two topics that you've spent a lot of time researching and writing about. So I want to begin by getting a baseline. I want to know, how does Cassie Holmes define happiness?
When I use the term happiness, I'm referring to what we, in the literature, the psychology literature, refer to as subjective well-being. So that includes both how we experience our days or hours, so how we're feeling during our experiences, but it also includes how we feel about our experiences and about our lives overall. So there is that satisfaction piece, that evaluation of like, things are good. And that's where you also pick up on some of the sense of meaning. Yes, it's about the joy we experience in our days, but it's also that sense of fulfillment that life is good overall.
But when you break it down, I know this is a complex topic that you've spent thousands of hours researching. What are like the key ingredients to happiness?
Yeah, just start right in there, the big ones. Well, in my work, what I'm focusing on is how we invest our time for greater happiness. And what that's picking up on when you look at what are the sort of factors that influence how we feel in and about our lives. Genetics do play a role, but we don't have a like influence on them, right? Like whether you're a naturally more positive person. Our circumstances also do play a role, but often less than we expect. So these are your sort of general circumstances like income level, marital status, parental status. Those do play a role, but the part that I'm most interested in is the last bucket, which is what we think about and what we do in the day to day, because that has a larger role than we expect. So, what we choose to focus on and what we choose to invest our time in. And then the question is like, okay, well, what are those ways of spending time that are associated with greater happiness? And that's the whole other conversation that I hope we get into, but I don't want to sort of, I don't know, give the punchline right off the bat.
Cassie, I want to get into it all, but I've seen you report a statistic that is alarming. 46% of Americans report feeling time poor. That's the phrase that you use. And I'm curious, what is making us feel more time poor today than maybe in prior generations? What is contributing to the time poor state that we're all in, or so many of us are in?
Yeah. And I will say that that sense of time poverty, of not having enough time to do what you set out to do, is not happy. It is associated with high levels of stress. And it's funny that I'm a researcher of happiness and time, but my relationship with time started off as not very happy at all because of that time poverty, that sense of not having enough time to do what we set out to do. Now, your question as into why so many people feel this way. Almost half of Americans feel this way. And that includes, like, within that sample of retirees and folks who are empty nesters who do not feel time poor. In fact, they often feel like they have too much time. But a lot of people feel this way. Why? Well, there's a few factors. It is a subjective sense of not being able to accomplish what you set out to do. And our sense of what we should or could be accomplishing is something that has shifted. There's so many technological advances that have helped us get more done more quickly, but also that has shifted our expectations of how much we should and could be getting done. Like, our smartphones are so helpful, right? They let us do anything and everything at any moment. They also make us feel like we should and could be doing everything at that moment. And so that's one thing, this sort of sense of what you should or could be doing, which technological advances has highlighted and heightened. And then there's also, I mean, that's the sort of cohort or generational effect that leads into it. But then there are also factors like demographic factors. Like, we looked at not only sort of how pervasive it is, but whom is it particularly pervasive for? So women tend to feel more time poor than men. Working parents, particularly if your partner is working, and we find in our data, particularly if you have young children, those under the age of 4 are the most time poor. And you're smiling, which makes me think that probably you're in that bucket. And the effects, not only like is it a serious issue because it's so pervasive, but it's really limiting and lessening and makes us less happy. It makes us less healthy. When we feel time poor, we're less likely to exercise. We don't go to the doctor when we should be. It makes us less confident in being able to achieve what we set out to do. It makes us less nice. We're less likely to help others out when we feel like we're in such a hurry. And it makes us less happy. And I have research to show that.
Cassie, so I am smiling because I have a 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we were out trick-or-treating last night. And I've got questions for you about the Halloween parade and things of that nature that I want to get to. But I want to put a pin first in something you said a couple minutes ago. First, about this idea of too much time versus and too little time. Like, both can be detrimental. But well, let's start there. What do you mean by that? Let's go deeper into that. What is too much free time? What is too little free time? And how do we optimize to be right where we want to be?
Yeah. And it's funny because in my state of extreme time poverty, when I had a little baby and I was working and that never-ending to-do list, there was absolutely a point in my career where I was like, I don't know if I can do this, right? It's too much and I don't have enough time. And at that point, I was like, you know what? Maybe the solution is to quit my job. Maybe it's not sustainable. And then I actually was like, well, that's an empirical question. Would having more available time make me happier? So we tested it. We looked at what's the relationship between the amount of discretionary time people have and their happiness. And we analyzed data from the American Time Use Survey. So we could look at how tens of thousands of working as well as non-working Americans spent a regular day. And from that, we found this pattern of results, which was really consistent, like a upside down U, like an arc or a rainbow, which shows that happiness goes down on both ends of the spectrum. In our data, we saw that those with less than approximately 2 hours of discretionary time in the day were less happy. We also saw that those with more than approximately 5 hours of discretionary time in the day were also less happy. That's the too much time effect. And you're like, how is that even possible? In those hectic days where you're like, oh, life on the beach would be just what I need. But it turns out that people are driven to be at least a little productive. That is, we are averse to being idle. And so when we spend all the hours of the day in and day out, with nothing to show for it, it undermines our sense of productivity and purpose. And from that, we feel less satisfied. So with a too little time, those with less than 2 hours, it's heightened levels of stress that makes us less happy. With too much time, it's lower sense of productivity and purpose that makes us less happy.
That lower sense of productivity and purpose, that takes me back to the second item you said a few minutes ago that I wanted to come back to. And that's this idea that you talked about, this expectation, that the expectations have maybe shifted because of technology and smartphones. And there's this feeling and belief that we can get more done. And I think I'm guilty of that personally at times. I tend to want to take on too much. And I always think that there's a way for me to tack a little bit more on. And I'm curious, do you think it's more so that we need to change our expectations? Do we need to change our systems in terms of how we get things? Systems, not meaning technology, but systems in terms of how we operate our life? Or is it a combination of both? Because I know in the book you talk a lot about systems, but do we have to change the expectation? Should we expect less of ourselves?
No, we shouldn't expect less of ourselves. And really the question is what we spend our time on. Because what the research shows, and even in that relationship between amount of discretionary time and satisfaction, you see that there's a wide range in the middle between 2 and 5 hours where the relationship is flat. There's also a lot of noise in the data. And so even the too much time effect only happened among those who were spending their discretionary time in ways that were sort of purely relaxing and not in themselves. There's actually ways of spending discretionary time, social connection, as well as investing in our personal development and growth and learning and exercise, that actually you don't see that drop off. But the reason I'm pointing that out is because it is actually not about how much time you have available or how little time you have available and therefore how much you take on. It's really, the answer is spending on activities that are actually worthwhile. And so that's the answer to your question. It's not just a question of taking on more and saying yes to more, because that will make us do more and therefore be more productive and better. What we really need to do is be really intentional about what we do say yes to, what we do say no to, and prioritize those things that matter. And then you have to identify, okay, what are those things that matter? And I talk in Happier Hour about actually several exercises that you can do to identify what are those worthwhile activities for you personally. One is time tracking. So over the course of the week, writing down what you did, as well as rating coming out of it, how you felt. So often we think that one way of spending time is our source of enjoyment. And then people actually look at their ratings and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that X made me feel so lousy. And, Y was so worthwhile and so fulfilling. There's also reflection pieces. And then there's also what I really love, this exercise calls the 5 whys exercise. And it's, why do you do what you do? And then your answer to that, you ask again, why is that important to me? So this is a very personal thing. And then you ask for that answer, why is that important to me? And after asking yourself 5 levels of why, what it really does is unearth and reveal what ultimately drives you. What is that sort of higher order goal or purpose? And then you use that to figure out what are those things that you say yes to? What are those things that you say no to? Because you absolutely have to say no to stuff in order to feel that sense of fulfillment, so that you don't get burnout. Because the burnout comes from when we're so busy, but it all feels worthless. It's not, even though we will still be busy, if you're doing stuff, at least some of the time investing in what really matters to you, then that's the energizing. So I don't know if the sort of clarity of that very long-winded answer was, it's not about doing more, it's about doing what's worthwhile.
No, I understood what you were saying there, Cassie. I'm curious. So for the person listening who's like, look, I just love watching Netflix. And I logged it on my chart and I rated it as giving me a lot of satisfaction. What do you say to that person? Like, is that giving them purpose? I'm curious, like, for your take on that.
Well, it's their own assessment. If they are honestly rating, it's funny because that's actually one of those activities. Like I teach this course. I've been teaching hundreds of students, MBAs, executive MBAs, and they're like watching their experience and their time tracking, as well as readers are now doing it and letting me know. And it's the watching TV is one of these surprising things that they're like, oh, this is something I really enjoy. And actually, if you look in their time tracking, that first hour is fun. Hour 2, 3, 4, when you're saying yes to the next episode, you actually see the ratings decline. So it's not like TV is bad. It is when it's actually, I'm not saying it's bad at all. It's up to one's individual ratings. And so like the sort of basic answer to your question is like, sure, if it's not like, what do you enjoy doing is their answer. But if they look at how they felt coming out of each half hour of an activity, those readings are real. Like that's picking up on that satisfaction. And if they continue to feel so super satisfied, like hour 5 on day 5 of, 5 hours a day, good for them. But more often than not, I've seen my students be like, oh my gosh, it was just that first hour that was fun. And oh my gosh, I didn't realize that 20% of my week is spent watching TV. And here I am feeling so time poor and I don't have time for these other things that actually really sort of make me even more fulfilled.
Cassie, I'm curious. I mentioned earlier that I'm a parent of young kids.
Yeah.
And my wife and I have this conversation all the time about how busy the kids are. And the kids seem busy and it constantly feels like we're just shuttling from the bus stop to this activity, from this activity to this activity. And then when you step back, a lot of the activities, if not all the activities that they're doing, seem like they're meaningful and they're gaining something from them. And there's nothing that they're doing that doesn't appear to be giving them enjoyment. How, as parents, can we think about our kids' time? Not just like our time as parents and the time that we're being present and devoting to them, but constructing and configuring their lives in a way while we have some control at this stage of their lives to put them kind of in an optimal place of success. Like we always feel like they're overscheduled, but then we also feel like we're not doing the right things. I don't know if we're overanalyzing it. What do you have to say?
It's interesting because busyness among adult populations have become somewhat of a status symbol. It's like the more I do, that sort of communicating your importance, that you're in high demand, that you're super competent because, you must be in high need. And if you're so busy. But what's interesting is actually I heard from a high schooler, and all of my data is among adults, but a high schooler who read the book. And she's like, oh my God, this spoke to me. I was like, that's so interesting. You're a high schooler. Why did it speak to you so much? And what was very clear was the hyper scheduling and over scheduling was such a tax on her. And she, like you, she's like, and like every single club seemed so important because it was signaling for her that she was committed. that she was someone who's a doer. And then the expectation is that will look good on the application, to college. And her parents have that sort of sense too. And then I was like, well, what of these are those activities that you really care about? And it wasn't all of them. It absolutely wasn't all of them. And the thing that gets sort of lost is, or actually another way to approach it, because we do have this sense of like each one of those is giving some value. And so you don't want to take away that particular value. But there's also huge amount of value in open time to reflect, time to rest, time to just sort of be with those around you without that pressure of checking something off your list. And so since we're so prone to like make everything that's important have a place in the calendar, one approach I actually think is really helpful is to carve out and protect time in the calendar to do nothing. That's where your kids start to be really creative and they start to like generate their own interests and thoughts and relax and rest. And so protecting time for sort of nothingness, I think is important.
So Cassie, when you say carving out free time to just be, I mean, is that literally like no structure, like kids go do whatever you want? Or is it like, hey, we're gonna carve out time and we're gonna pick a game to play as a family? How structured or unstructured is this free time?
Yeah. What you don't want is it just to be like if you say do whatever you want, they will get on screens. And then they're just sort of absorbed in something without actually that time to create and to be and to generate that social connection. So what I would say is that for that time just to be, that yes, playing games, going for a hike, going outside. So there's actually a lot of research that shows just the value of being outdoors as a source of perspective and energy. Exercise is another one of these things that, when we feel so busy, we feel like we don't have time to do, but it is not only good for us physiologically, but it's also good for us mentally. You see it as a significant mood booster and increaser of self-esteem. And that social connection piece. So, at the very beginning, you're like, what's the sort of answer for happiness? If there is one thing that is so critical, it is genuine connection with individuals and a sense of belonging. And that is something that requires attention. And if we're distracted with our activities that all pull us sort of separate places or on our screens that are pulling our minds somewhere else, that undermines that connection, which is so valuable and important. So in that quote unquote, free time that you're carving out, if it provides an opportunity to truly connect, that is so important.
On the power of connection and like continuing that thought, I've also read a lot of your writing on the idea of random acts of kindness and how random acts of kindness can build connection with people that you know and also with complete strangers. And it got me thinking about this whole everybody pulls the tarp philosophy that I talk about every single week on this show. And the fact that doing little things that people don't expect can really power both your success and the team or the organization and community's success. What is it scientifically, and what does the research tell us about random acts of kindness, whether it's for a complete stranger or somebody that you know very well, that as to why it has such a profound effect?
Yeah. Well, it's something that I love so much because, when we talked about time poverty, one of the things that it does is it makes us less kind. It makes us sort of be absorbed in moving through our own to-do list, not making time for others. But I've actually found in my research that when people give their time, spend some time to help someone else or do something for someone else, it actually makes them feel like they have more time. And that is driven by this sense of efficacy. So to answer your question, why does doing an act of kindness make us feel so good? Well, it makes us realize how much we can achieve in our days, and also making other people feel happy. Happiness is sort of such a wonderful virtuous cycle where you see someone is contagious. So you see someone happy, it makes you happier. And the fact that you are the person to make them feel happy, then it's like even better. And that sense of agency that comes from being kind and helping is really important, not only to sort of help offset our sense of time poverty, like, oh, life is too hectic, I can't take the time for others, but even in really basic situations. I'm involved in an organization that helps people experiencing homelessness sort of get their lives in order and sort of find housing and jobs. And it's so interesting because one of the steps in that process is to have them do an act of kindness. And as individuals who feel like they don't have any resources and don't have a sense of agency, like life is just bad, but when they do something kind for someone else, it shows them that actually they can do. And it's so neat that that's a sort of step in the process.
That is so powerful. So powerful. I've told this story to so many people over the last few weeks, and this is like silly, but I was at the grocery store, and the woman working at the grocery store sees me in the self-checkout aisle, like starting to get the produce out where you have to start coding in, the numbers. And she walks over and she says, let me, I know all the codes for all these. Anything I can do to make your day easier, I'm going to do. And I have told that story, Cassie, I must be hundreds of times in the last few weeks. Like every little act of kindness, I think, has this profound effect on the person that experiences it on the receiving end. But as you said, the research says that it helps the person giving the act of kindness as well. I'm also curious, Cassie, about this concept of presence and being present as it pertains to building connection and those ever important interpersonal connections. I'm thinking back, like I said earlier, yesterday was Halloween, and I was at my younger daughter's Halloween parade. And I'm kind of battling internally, okay, do I just keep watching and smiling and enjoying all this? Or do I pull out my phone to take pictures? And I wrestle with that a lot as a parent. What does the research say? What do you believe? How much room for there is the picture taking versus just the absorbing the moment?
Well, being present in the moment is so important. And I mean, even without the picture taking, so often we're distracted, like on our phones, like responding to a text, or in our head, sort of cycling through that to-do list of thinking about like, what's next? Like after the parade, what, am I rushing off to get everything done? And so just the fact that you are aware of whether or not you're present is a wonderful thing. The role of taking photos is really interesting. There's really neat work by Alex Barish, and they find that actually the goal of taking the photo is what matters. So when people are taking photos during experiences with the intention of sharing it and posting it, it actually decreases enjoyment because it evokes this sort of social anxiety and self-presentation. But what they find in their work is when you're taking the photo to preserve and capture memories, it actually makes you more engaged because you're focusing on those pieces that you want to capture in your memory and you want to sort of highlight. So it makes you more engaged. Now, I wouldn't spend the entire parade snapping photos, but certainly the photo taking is really sort of bringing you into sort of, again, capture that sort of best part of the experience. And then the benefit of that is then you have the memories. Like when you see those photos later, it allows you to relive those times, and it does increase connection. There's some also really neat work that shows that families who reminisce together, whether with the aid of photographs or otherwise just sort of talking about things that they've shared and stories, report greater closeness and connection with their families. So all to say, taking some photos, it's a good thing for memory preservation.
Wow. There's so many good lessons there. I'm like taking so many notes. Cassie, I could ask you questions all day. When I think about this being present in a moment, the pictures or not taking the pictures or all that, I don't know if you saw it. There's been a few examples of this over the last few years, but there was this viral social media, or this viral photo on social media of the end, I think it was, of the New York or the Boston Marathon. There must have been 500 people in this picture, and they're at the finish line, and 499 of the 500 people have a phone up taking a picture of a loved one or a friend crossing the finish line. And then there's this older woman. She's just standing with her arms crossed, smiling ear to ear. And it's always kind of stuck with me, and it's made me kind of question, am I present? Am I absorbing? I want to soak everything in. I'll have to send you a picture if you haven't seen of this thing. It's really, really cool.
That's neat. I'd love to see it. But yeah, I mean, the fact that there's a picture of her smiling is neat in itself, because it will also help her remember that perfect moment that she's the one absorbing.
I think the New York Times is going to help her, because I think it was somebody got the picture and it went viral. There was a similar example, I think, at a recent PGA Tour event when Tiger Woods was playing, and you had a crew behind him and everybody was snapping a photo except one guy who was standing there with a beer in his hand, just taking it all in. And it's powerful. It's powerful. Yeah. As we start to wrap up our conversation, Cassie, one of the other topics I wanted to ask you about is this concept of ordinary versus extraordinary moments and experiences. And this idea that I've certainly experienced kind of in my own life of making maybe a more ordinary experience even just a little bit more elevated and a little extraordinary, even if it's not like by the charts, like so extraordinary. Like an example being, instead of just putting on a movie as a family, making it like, hey, later this week, we're going to have a family movie night, and we're going to make the popcorn, and we're going to like randomly select the movie out of a bag that, that my wife and I put like 30 movie names in that are like pre-approved for the kids to pick out of the hat. It almost feels like we have, at least I have, more fond memories of those experiences. Is there something to that? Like making it a seemingly ordinary experience, like just watching a movie, just a little bit more elevated.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is when people reflect on their experiences that brought the greatest joy, so often they're really ordinary. Like it is. And so we looked at what's the happiness from extraordinary and ordinary experiences. You see that for some, particularly folks who are older or who recognize that their time is finite, ordinary experiences produce as much happiness as extraordinary experiences. And the times that they do are when there's that social connection. And also it's really that sort of the noticing, because so often we don't notice those ordinary experiences. We sort of move through them. And so this is important, because what you're saying is like elevating an ordinary experience. What you're doing is drawing the attention to it. So I talk in my book about turning routines into rituals. And it is taking something that's very ordinary and turning it into a ritual. Like even your movie night, family movie night, it's like a tradition. And actually families who have shared holiday traditions, and it's not religious based, it's just things that you always do together as a family over the holidays, the families are more likely to gather, and they report enjoying the holidays more. And partners who have shared rituals report greater relationship satisfaction. So all to say that, yes, you can elevate an ordinary experience, but really what that's doing is drawing attention to it. It's like just making sure that you're noticing. It's not just moving through watching a movie together. It is movie night, give it a name, and that in itself draws attention and makes it more special.
Cassie, I can tell you one thing. This has been a good use of my time. I would give this off the charts green in terms of helping me better understand all these questions that I have. And I know so many listening are going to benefit from this as well. Thank you for all of the outstanding work that you do and all of the great content that you put out into the universe. Again, I want to make sure everybody listening has the name of the book. It's a fantastic book. Happier Hour, How to Beat Distraction, Expand Your Time, and Focus on What Matters Most. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, an Amazon Best Book of 2022. Dr. Cassie Holmes, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this week.
It was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of tarp pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.